Okay, I got a chart of Catalina pulled up here, and we could go over some of the areas where I've caught squid in the past and have been able to follow it up with yellowtail and white sea bass. So typically I'd be chugging out of Huntington Harbor in the afternoon, coming around the east end of Catalina, past the slide here, around Seal Rocks and Church Rock. And for me, it usually began up here past the third V's. So we'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit. There's some good yellowtail and white sea bass and calico bass fishing to be had all through here. So, but we're going to get up here. So once you get above the third V right here, there's an area that on the chart right here is called the Palisades. And from the Palisades to Silver Canyon is probably one of my favorite areas nowadays, that I've lost the China Point to Bend Weston area. And, one thing that we could go over real quick is, a pretty good way to locate squid. And, I mentioned earlier in the part one video that, if you see, if you get there when it's still light out, you'll see seals rafted up, kind of laying on their side and sleeping, and maybe a bunch of birds sitting down. And that's a pretty good signal that squid's there. But if you get there and it's dark, one of the methods that I use for locating it that works really good for me is I had a squid light that used to hang off the side of my boat, off the rail. You can't do this with an underwater light because you can't be trolling that thing around. But what I used to do is I would just drive around with the light on, about 5 miles an hour, just kind of real slow, and I would just kind of zigzag back and forth. And I mentioned, that 86 or that 82 to about 106 feet of water seemed to be where we found most of our squid, and I would just kind of stitch that area back and forth with the light on. And what I would do is I would look for squid to come shooting up underneath the light, and when I saw that, I would pull the boat out of gear and wait to see if any volume showed up. And at the same time, you're driving around looking at the meter. I mean, it helps if you're the driver, you're looking at your fish finder and you're looking for the weaker blue marks close to the bottom, because ultimately, you want to get on squid that they're active on the bottom, actively attaching their eggs to the bottom. That's going to be where you have your best chance of catching fish. Another thing I want to say too is, I mentioned earlier that 96 foot, 16 fathoms seems to be, the area where we get bit the best. But it was in this area one night, and we were like the first boat out there. We got there in the afternoon and, got on our squid, and the next morning came along, and, there was a few other boats out there, maybe 10 or so, spread out along the Palisades here. And the guys that were in the shallower depths all got bit, and we were just kind of out in the cold watching. So, it's... there's no hard, fast rules. We did make sure that the next night we set up when we went back to fish it, because it was a 2-day trip. We got in shallower and we did catch fish the next morning. So that's just something to consider. But for me, this is a good area. This Palisades, you could catch squid all through Silver Canyon here, up to Salto Verde, up and around Salto Verde. We'll all hold squid there all through this area. This little area right here is called Freddy's Beach. It gets squid in there too. The few times that I have, set up there for catching squid, it's all been on the deeper side, like 120 to 140 feet. So, we caught yellowtail one time, and yeah, we were out pretty deep. So as you're coming up here towards the west end, now you're going to hit the MLPA closure here. So all this area right here, it's open to fishing squid. You could dip for squid there. That's not a problem, but you can't fish for yellowtail and sea bass there, which is really a shame, because this little area right here is called the Rabbit Hutch, and this area out here was the best area that I had found for catching fish after we caught our bait. So there was an area hard bottom that started a little bit here above China Point, probably where that fathom curve kind of dips in right there. And it was kind of like a harder bottom. It would show up on the meter, and then it would soften up for about a quarter of a mile, a little bit past this point right here, and it would soften up, and then it would get hard again. And in that softer bottom area, it was we would find squid would consistently nest in there, and that without a doubt was our best, most productive area. We used to catch so much fish in there. Not every trip. I mean, that's not how it goes. But the thing I liked about it too is, right in here in this rabbit hutch up on this end of it, there's a sheer bluff right there, and there was a kelp line in there that worked really good in an uphill condition. And this little beach here too, we caught sea bass and halibut multiple times off this little beach when the conditions were right. But anyways, there's squid all through here. You just can't follow it up with the game fish afterwards. Now, once you get past the 22 line right here, the MLPA ends, and you could squid and fish for yellowtail and sea bass all through here. I mean, all through Ben Weston. You got to watch out for Sentinel Reef right here at night. So that sticks way out there. So that could really be a big problem if you're not paying attention. But you'll get squid all through this area. Out in front of Little Harbor and up through Pedestal Rock and all the way here into the crook of the island there. Squid will get in there. And I've never fished squid here, but we bought it from a light boat once up in the tip of the canyon. There was quite a few light boats, and that was pretty deep that night. We couldn't find any squid, so we kind of had to throw in the towel and buy it from the light boats. Catch really good squid here from time to time in Lobster Bay on this end of it. Sometimes you'll meter it during the day. It'll be off the edge here, and we've set up here at night when we've seen nothing, and once the sun went down and we turned the lights on, it just comes pouring up over the edge, and so much so that's sometimes you plug up there and you have to get out of there because there is just too much squid. I've never really followed it up with catching any fish there. We did have a bite on barracuda once, and that was something I forgot to mention in the prior video too. One of the fish you could catch out on the squid grounds. We haven't really got those in a long time, but there's a point there when it would just be wide open log barracuda, like those 7 to 9 pounders, and you just biting off everything that you put down there. It'd be really frustrating. I remember one trip I lost like 5 jigs that were hanging off the rod, sitting in the rod holder, and every time you get bit, you'd have to tie on a new dropper loop, and it was just crazy. But that's one of the fish you get out there on the squid grounds too, is barracuda. Never really did any squidding from Cape Cortez all the way up to Ribbon Rock. Did catch some squid here in Ironbound Cove. I was out on the outer limits with a guy named Gary Nordby. Boy, I really learned a lot fishing on that boat in the 80s about squid and sea bass and yellowtail and especially fishing San Clemente. And that's what we did that night, was we just made our squid there and went to San Clemente. But you could get squid all the way through here. Once you get up here to DJ Point and West Cove, it gets a lot better. And, there's squid all through here, all through the cove there and up above Eagle Rock. And then when you come around the west end here, I have never done any squidding from the west end all the way to Arrow Point, but man, there is a lot of opportunity for fishing sea bass and calico bass in the shallows up here. So that's kind of an area you want to pay some attention to. Seems to get really good in there too when it's really super windy out of the west. And as we come down this way past Indian Rock, I've never looked around there that much for squid, but in here inside of Eagle Reef, we get really good squid there, and sometimes that, I've experienced it where it's set up for weeks and weeks and weeks, and caught a lot of squid and follow that up with sea bass and yellowtail there. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit here. So once you get here into the Isthmus and Fisherman's Cove, this is all closed. This is all MLPA. I have it all marked off with an alarm zone there until you get right past, right to Yellowtail Point. Now, in Empire Landing, sometimes the squid gets in there pretty good. I've never followed it up with with fish there, but I have done squidding in there and I've taken it somewhere else. And so, yeah, you could get it there at Empire Landing, but I've never caught a sea bass or a yellowtail where I caught my bait. And then coming all the way down to Red Bluffs, you know, I don't do any squidding there. There's some yellowtail and stuff to be had all through here, Gibraltar. Once you get to Goat Harbor there, you're in another MLPA until you get to Long Point. And then once you get around Long Point, you got the Hen Rock, White's Cove area, and the squid can get in there pretty good. And that's another area where I've never caught squid on the grounds, but I have caught yellowtail and white sea bass around Hen Rock and Sally's Galley in the water hole here. And then coming all the way down here, that's about it for me. That's where you know, my experience ends. Oops, I'm zoomed out too much. So this whole area from about the water hole kelp, I mean, there's good slow troll and sardines for yellowtail all along here, you know, down to Frog Rock, but I've never done any squid fishing. And then you get to Avalon, and I've seen some light boats set up there fishing squid, but that wouldn't be a place where I'd want to set up, just too much boat traffic. And yeah, nothing here. I've never done anything here in front of the runway and the Pebbly Beach. And then, you know, around the can dump, we were spending the night there, and we had some squid come up underneath the underwater light we just had out for no reason. And but it was way too deep to crowd, and it wasn't really much volume anyways, but they were big giant squid. They were like 8 inches. And then yeah, this whole slide area is too deep. I don't think you'd find any squid there. It drops off really quick, but hopefully, you know, that'll kind of help you out. And, you know, if you're out there at night driving around, you know, just be careful and you know, good luck. So once you've found your squid and you're set up on the squid grounds, you know, it's time to go over the tackle that you're going to be using for your fishing out there. And, you know, these are the things that I like to do that have worked very well for me over the years. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the equipment, because I know a lot of people that don't have their own boats were pretty bored if they even watched all that other stuff, but everybody likes gear, right? So in part one, I mentioned that I had rod holders mounted off the rail of my boat. You know, so I could put some lines out. So usually in the very forward one, I'm going to be using this right here, and this is an old school glass 670 CalStar with a yellowtail special reel on it, 40-pound test. And so I'm usually going to have a heavy jig in there, and what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to send it down to the bottom. I'm going to put the rod in put it in gear, put the rod in the rod holder, and take out all the slack so it's just touching the bottom. And then I'm going to take like about a good 3 cranks on that thing and get it about 5 feet off the bottom. I don't want it sitting in the bottom where there's going to be a bunch of squid eggs and stuff. So the next rod that I use here is a 20 size with 30-pound test for the dropper loop. Once again, you know, with a dropper loop, I'm going to have that set up about 5 feet off the bottom, 4 to 5 feet, and nothing less than 30-pound test. So pretty basic setup. And then for the rod that I hold in my hand and I actively fish with, I'll usually use either 25-pound test or 30-pound test. It depends. And on this, I'm usually fishing a live squid with a sliding sinker. And it could be anywhere from a 1/2 ounce, maybe 3/8 of an ounce, to 3/4 of an ounce is probably the norm. If the current's running a little heavier, then, you know, you might have to go to a heavier sliding sinker, or you could use a lead head. And what I'll do is I'll just cast it out and I'll actively work it through the water column, like I'll let it hit the bottom, and then you know, wind it up real slow. Maybe just kind of you know, back reel it with my fingers, wind it up slow, free spool it, drop it back down. You know, just working the water column up and down. And then the last rod that I use is this 400 size bait caster right here that I'll use with the jigging squid, and I'll kind of show you the technique. I mean, I probably would think that everybody knows this, but you know, once again, this is going to be 40-pound test on this anytime you're using the jig. So what I'll do is I'll just drop this down to the bottom, right, and I'll let the jig hit the bottom. And, you know, wind it up like one crank, and now I just hook the rug there. I'll wind it up like one, I'm tripping on that one. I'll wind it up one crank, and I'll just work that thing slowly off the bottom. I'll just lift the rod up to about 11 o'clock, and then I'll just let the jig fall slowly back down and follow it down. And you know, a lot of times I have a live squid pinned on there, and just keep repeating this. Lift it up and follow it slowly back down. A lot of times, you know, you get bit on the sink, you don't even feel it. Your line just doesn't go down. So if your line, that's why I like to use Spectra. So if your line piles up in a coil on the surface, wind down and set the hook on that thing, because you know, fish has got it in its mouth. So what I'll do here is I'll show you what the dropper loop looks like, and I'll let you have a look at what some of the heavy jigs that I like to use. This is why I did this in my living room, man, because there's just not enough room to do this down in the garage. But yeah, I'll let you see what those heavy jigs look like. Here's a look at some of the jigs that I like using for fishing for white sea bass when I'm on the squid ground. So this is the old tried and true Tatty 4.0 with the red S on it. This one's probably my favorite, the Solace 7X Junior, and it's all white, and then I just put some pink nail polish on there. It's kind of a pearlescent type pink nail polish. I don't think they make this 7X Junior heavy anymore. And then when the current's really ripping, I'll just go to the full size Solace 7X. Same thing, it's white with that same pink nail polish. And then if you want to pin a couple squid on there, you could go ahead and use, I'll go ahead and use this Solace 6X right here. Same thing, pink and white. And then if I'm going to be using jigging squid, this one, you know, if you want to pin a couple squid on it, work it real slow, up and down off the bottom, kind of bounce it, you know, just lift the rod tip and let it fall back down. And then here's one that you could cast and retrieve, pin a squid on that. Works good when there's a lot of current running, and you could go ahead and cast that thing out, let it sink to the bottom, or just let it sink in the water column, reel it in, free spool it, drop it back, and you just work it back and forth. Here's a jig right here of special note that I retired, and I got this in the 1980s. This is a Yo-Zuri jig, and man, I caught a lot of fish on this. So it's a dart style jig, and same thing, pink and white. That's, you know, I thought this thing would never get bit, so I just tied it on one day, and lo and behold, man, that thing started getting bit. So that's why I went to the pink and white on all those, was because this one got bit so good. And if you can see, it's got a, you know, like a prism tape on there. But yeah, I've retired that thing. I caught so many fish on it, I don't want to lose it. All right, let me show you the dropper loop I like to use here. So I've always used these Mustads 9174 hooks here. 4.0 size. I've always had fantastic results with these. They're kind of, you know, flat shanked with no offset, and the point of the hook kind of sticks out. Those work really good for hooking squid. So on that dropper loop, and I'll go ahead and I'll show it because it's kind of hard to see in here, but 5-ounce torpedo sinker is where I start. I never go less than 5 ounce. A lot of times we're fishing 6 and 8 ounces, and sometimes up to 10, depending on what the current's doing. But let me go ahead and I'll set this up here so you can kind of get a look at it. So what you want to do with this dropper loop is you want to have it pretty long. This is about 4 foot, so the sinker's right here, and I got the hook right here. So ideally, you know, there's going to be a bunch of eggs and stuff, probably about a foot of squid eggs off the bottom. So you want to get your stuff up above off the bottom. Normally, you know, I found that it seems like the fish are cruising, you know, a couple feet off the bottom, and you know, if you're too close to the bottom, that's where the bat rays and the horn sharks live too. So, you know, that's just one of the reasons why you want to get it off the bottom too. I use a pretty short branch line coming off this dropper loop. It's only about a foot long, and that way when it's down there, sometimes the current's pretty bad down there, and you know, your squid will be twisting in the current. If you use too long of a dropper coming off, you know, you're going to have, you know, just a kinked line, and you're going to have to keep retying these things. And I always use a spider hitch knot on that. Caught a lot of big fish on those. Have never had a spider hitch blow up on me, not one time. So anyways, that's kind of the end of things for fishing on the squid grounds there. And, you know, hopefully this will, you know, maybe help somebody. I don't know, you know, but if you get out there, good luck.